Hey everybody, it's Jason Blaha here, and it's time for part 3 of the Q&A, so let's go ahead and get this started. Alright, first question. Hey Jason, I have taken your advice and dropped the ego on the bench press and am doing strict 1-second pause reps from now on. I have one question about form. Is it better to let the bar sit on your chest during the pause, letting all tension go, or should you be keeping tension and pausing basically right at the chest or like 1 millimeter above the chest? I find that when I let the bar dig in or sink into my chest, it even has a little bit of range of motion, but I'm not sure this is the correct way to do it. Alright, no, you do not need to be stopping above the chest. You can go ahead and let the bar sink in, but what we mean by tightness is going to be pulling your scapula together. That's where your tightness is on the bench press. If you don't keep your scapula tight, your pectorals get recruited less on the exercise. They're going to do less work. It's going to make you less explosive at the bottom. But yeah, you absolutely do not stop above the chest. We've talked repeatedly about doing partials being risky, and I think for people doing that's a problem. Now, people are going to say, what about the spoto press? That's an accessory exercise. That's an accessory exercise. Anyone who wants a stronger bench is going to do a lot of pause work on the chest. Don't confuse accessory exercises that were never done by the 2nd, 3rd, or 4th place in the world bench press holder with an accessory exercise that someone else does. No, in general, you need to come all the way to your chest, let it sink into your chest, but you can let it sink into your chest while keeping your scapula and shoulder blades pulled together tight. Don't let everything go loose. You need to learn to do it that way, to where you sink it into your chest while staying tight. That's the correct technique for a good pause bench, particularly if you want to get stronger and more explosive out of the bottom, because it adds that range of motion at the bottom. So you've got to learn to do both. Keep it tight while doing that. Alright, next question. Hi Jason, I'm in a job that I need to sit most of the day and the pain comes with it, lower back stiffness in the leg, etc. And whenever I lift weights I feel better. I wanted to know if you have an explanation on why it is happening. Thanks, love the videos. People with desk jobs who get hamstring tightness and get pain in their lower back, it is actually due to your hamstrings getting tighter, because you spend hours and hours every day seated at a desk. Your hamstrings tend to draw up, and when your hamstrings tend to get tighter or do like that, you get tilt in your pelvis that tends to roll it under more, which also makes it easier to strain your lower back. Some of your solutions for this are going to be starting with exercises like Romanian deadlifts to work on stretching your hamstrings. Now you can do hurdler stretches and stuff for this, but performing these incorrectly actually can aggravate some of the pain and irritation in the lower back, the inflammation that happens there as a result of it. So if you're going to do stretches or hurdler stretches for your hamstrings, you need to pay very, very close attention to your lower back. Meaning, don't let your lower back roll forward. Like you see people will put their foot up and they'll touch their foot or whatever to learn to stretch at different heights, or even on a couch or a countertop or whatever, but then they roll forward and roll their lower back forward to stretch and do that. That's not what you want to do. You've got to learn to keep that same protective arch in your lower back when you stretch your hamstrings that you would have on a squat. All right, and if you can do that, that's really what you want, so that you train your lower back not to roll forward. You need to learn to keep that curve in the lower back while you're stretching the hamstrings. But it's caused by hamstring tightness is the #1 contributing factor. And once the hamstrings become too tight, just to that position all the time for hours and hours every day, it creates a cascade, a chain effect through the body, because once one muscle or joint has an imbalance or an inappropriate pull on it, it tends to cause other things up the chain to do it. But that is your starting point right there. So if you can work on the hamstring tightness, it will resolve the other stuff, but just make sure that you don't exacerbate the inflammation or improper mechanics in your lower back, your lumbar region, when you're doing that. It's important to keep that in mind, because again, that will also cause its own set of problems. All right, next question. Hey Jason, I've been strict overhead pressing for 2 years now. I always warm up my neck and shoulders before I perform this exercise. However, I manage to strain my trap and neck very often when doing this exercise. What am I doing wrong? Could be a number of things. I would say the most likely candidate is your rack position in your hands when you're performing the overhead press. That is 9 times out of 10 what's going on. Meaning you're very possibly using a grip where you have the thumb over over the bar like this instead of a suicide grip where you're racked under. Because when you look at the bottom of an overhead press, people who do this, they grip it like this, see the thumbs? See how I just pulled my shoulders back and my traps are really, really tight? If you press like that, that hurts. That hurts right now. All right, you overhead press that way, your traps and your neck are getting a lot of strain. When you put them in a rack position like this, it feels totally different. So you're up here sitting on the chest and it's racked in the hands. When you overhead press, you don't have nearly the tension and the contraction at the bottom, particularly of your traps. Your traps actually get stretched a little bit instead of being tensed up and then bunching up against the neck. So the most likely culprit is the way you're gripping it. So if you've been gripping it with a thumb over grip and the elbow's down when you're overhead pressing, that is very, very likely to be your problem. And that's what I would guess. Now, if you've got a different problem beyond that, if you have been racking it that way and you're still getting that problem, you could have some other sort of pinched nerve, some tension problem in your neck. Maybe you need to see someone to do some soft tissue work on some of that, like a massage therapist. Someone who can get in there and work that soft tissue for you would, again, be my advice and solution for that. All right, next question. Is post-workout nutrition consumption even necessary? If your daily protein and caloric intake is already met and you are not going to train later on in the day, the following day, all right, good question. Does post-workout nutrition really matter in that case? Man, this is going to piss a lot of people off because I'm going to slay a sacred cow. No, it doesn't matter that much. Now, when I say not much, that doesn't mean not at all. And that's a big thing people misunderstand. When you say something is less important than people think it is, people interpret that as it doesn't matter at all. So I could just lift weights and not eat for 10 hours and I'll be perfectly fine. So, you have to be aware of that. When people make statements, people on the internet love to take a general statement of the importance of something and change it to not important at all and then come up with the most extreme possible answer. And these people who do that are basically fucking morons. We should probably find a way to call them out of the gene pool. I'm not trying to be a dick, but let's just be honest, they're stupid. Now, that being said, the scary part is they don't know they're stupid, but that's the Dunning-Kruger effect at work right there. But that being said, is it important? No, not that much, because normally all the studies we see on post-workout nutrition are generally people who either did very high volumes of training or they trained fasted. All those studies on protein shakes, post-workout stuff we have are for fasted training. A lot of people aren't aware of that. And that's a whole other topic as to why it has to be done that way, but it does have to be done that way in order to normalize the results. But that's fasted training. Usually the whole point of glycogen replenishment is to have you ready for your next training session. Well, if you're not training until tomorrow, you trained on food, you didn't deplete your glycogen stores that much if you carved up before you trained. They didn't get that depleted. Most people aren't lifting weights for 4 hours straight here, guys. You're probably in and out of the gym in an hour, hour and a half tops. So you didn't deplete enormous amounts of muscle glycogen. I would say no. Getting immediate post-workout nutrition in that case isn't going to make any significant difference to your results. Not at all. Because if you ate before you trained, you weren't fasted, you had plenty of carbs, you had protein, that stuff's all still in your system digesting. You already have your post-workout nutrition. It's digesting and absorbing still. It's still absorbing for hours and hours after you ate it. So you've got that going on. And, I would say as long as you get a decent meal with carbs and protein in, within a couple hours of lifting, you'll probably be fine. And again, as long as all your caloric and protein needs for the day are being met, what you're doing for someone who's not going to train again the same day, who got carbs and protein first, everything's normalized, your post-workout nutrition isn't going to have a measurable or significant effect on your results. It might have a little tiny effect, like a 1% difference, but you're not going to notice that personally. So no, it doesn't matter that much. All right, guys, but that's really all I have to say on that today. I hope it's been informative, and I will talk to you guys next time.